This is my new Volkswagen Caddy, a normal practical work van. It has two very comfortable front seats, a load of space in the back, but it only has this 75 horsepower diesel engine. Our goal in this video is to make this van as fast as possible by firstly taking out the engine, engine out, and replacing it with a much bigger engine. Then we'll try and start it, and just maybe we'll even get it driving. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Now, before I show you what engine we've bought for the Caddy, there's something we've got to do first. And that is a 0 to 60 test, because I want to compare the time that the van achieves now with the time that it can get at the end of the video after all of the work that we do to it. So 3, 2, 1. And that's 60. What do we get?
17.8.
17.8. So yeah, this van is pretty slow. So to fix that, this is what we've bought. Here we have an Audi A3, and for many of you watching this, you might be wondering why on earth I've just bought this. But the reason is that from this point, the A-pillar forward, underneath the surface, this car is basically the exact same as our Caddy. And that means that whatever engine we've got under here, we can put it in our Caddy easy enough. Now, the weird thing about this A3 is that it actually has a bigger engine than the equivalent year S3. And for those of you who know your Audis, you'll know that they use S and RS in front of their models to sort of determine which ones are the sporty ones. So the RS3 and the S3 are the sportier versions, and the A3 is supposed to be a less sporty version. But this A3 has a much bigger engine than the S3 and the RS3. If I open up the bonnet, I can show you a 3.2 litre VR6 engine. This is arguably the best engine that Volkswagen made during this period. It takes turbo boost really well. You can get 400 horsepower out of these, no problem. And the eagle-eyed viewers among you will know that this engine is the exact same engine in the equivalent era Golf R, meaning that when we put this engine in our Caddy, we will basically be making a Caddy R, which I think is really cool. The reason why we went for the A3 instead of the Golf R is because this is a heck of a lot cheaper. So, in order to make a Golf R spec Caddy van, or a Caddy R, we need to get the engine out of this and also the engine out of the Caddy. So where do we start?
Engine out of the Caddy.
Engine out of the Caddy. Let's do it. Now, I brought this van for just £1,200, and on top of that, the Audi was only £2,000, meaning that so far, we have spent just 3.2k on this project, and if we end up with a 250 horsepower VR6 swapped Caddy van, I don't think that is too bad. Now, we do need to spend a bit more money on some parts from Volkswagen that we need to make this engine swap work, but I'll get onto that when we come to it. For now, we just need to focus on removing the standard diesel engine. Let's go. Engine, take out. Process. Number one. Battery out. One battery removed. We're gonna do the airbox.
That was an ultra kick.
Yeah. Okay. The next thing to crack on with was to remove the subframe, but as you can see, it was pretty oily because this engine was leaking oil like no engine I've ever worked on. So we do have a bit of an oily subframe, which I'm sure all of you know, oil is supposed to be in the engine, making everything run smoothly. But if you want to have the smoothest possible experience when building a website, you need to be using Squarespace, the sponsor of today's video. Now, Squarespace is the all-in-one tool for you to build and run your business. So whether you need a website, an online store, marketing tools, or analytics, Squarespace is your one-stop shop. Building a website with Squarespace couldn't be easier. All you have to do is choose a template from one of the many customizable options, and once you've got that template, you can fully customize it with your own images, text, and logos. After you've done that, you can add whatever it is that you're selling, whether it's a physical product, a service, or even something like a digital download. So to build an amazing website, head to squarespace.com for your free trial, and when you're ready to launch, you can click the link in the description of this video and use the code jackmcneill for a 10% discount on your first website or domain name. But with all of that said, just take a look at how caked in oil this subframe is. It was horrible removing this because of how dirty it is, but now that's done, we can move on to taking out the drive shafts. One drive shaft. Drive shaft number 2. Now, because I don't really fancy battling with exhaust bolts, and we're not going to use this exhaust, we are just going to chop it off. And that is how the professionals do it. Look at that. So now everything underneath the van has been removed, I can now focus on accessing the front of the engine, and to do this we need to remove the wheel arch liners, the front bumper and also the headlights. There's our front bumper. So after I had removed those parts, the next thing I had to work on was removing the whole front panel and rad pack. This includes parts like the AC condenser, the radiator and the intercooler. However, after making some initial progress with this, I then ran into a very seized AC pipe. You actually do not need to go in the gym if you work on cars for a living. I promise.
This is the gym.
This is the gym. Oh, there we go, she's free. That was a battle and a half. It was a mental battle between me and the bolt.
The bolt lost.
The bolt did lose. Yeah, come on. This AC line. He's asking to get angle grinded off, but I'm like, no, I'm going to do it properly. Because what if we need to reuse these angles?
Exactly.
What if we need to reuse them?
And then they're angle grinded.
Good wiggle always. Come on. That's just been like seized on. This has been so corroded, which is why. There we go. Whoa. Look at that. That is why that wasn't coming off, and that's why the bolt was so hard to get off as well. Oh well.
It's off now.
It's off. With old cars, it's always about staying persistent, and it's stuff like that that can set you back hours if you're not careful. However, now that was done, I could take that whole front panel off, which then allowed me to continue disconnecting the final bits in the engine bay. And don't forget, if you do enjoy these videos, make sure to like and subscribe because it massively helps out the channel. The final thing I had to disconnect was the ECU, which sits behind this sort of false bulkhead. There we go. Okay, so here's our ECU. Just there. Should come off. There we go. Perfect. There we go. That is everything disconnected. That took way longer than it should have.
Finally.
Finally, right. Let's get it out. So if you've watched the channel before, you'll know what technique we like to use when removing engines, and it's to put a pallet underneath the engine and then unbolt the engine mounts, which will then allow us to lift the van over the engine. Once the engine was out, I could then give the engine bay a quick clean because it was very dirty. And then I had to get the van back up on the ramp to reinstall the subframe. Alongside that, I had to get the wheels back on as well, because that would then allow me to roll the van off the ramp so that I could then get the A3 on the ramp to begin removing the engine out of that. So that is our A3 up on the ramp, and now we can start removing the engine. But just a few things before we do so. Alongside this car having a Golf R engine, it also actually has the Golf R brakes. They are absolutely massive, and alongside it having Golf R brakes, it has all-wheel drive, meaning that this car is basically a Mark V Golf R32 with an Audi badge. It literally has Golf R brakes, all-wheel drive, and a Golf R engine. I mean, that is pretty much a Golf R. But anyways, because it is all-wheel drive, it means that we will have to disconnect the prop shaft, which lives above the exhaust, just there. And yeah, it's going to be a little bit more work to remove the engine, but it shouldn't be too bad. Now, just a quick thing. I know there are going to be a few people in the comments that are going to be sad that we are taking apart an Audi A3 to do this project. But there's a few reasons why we're doing it. Firstly, way more cost effective. For £2 we have everything here that we need to do the engine swap. Secondly, every single time we have tried buying an engine for a project that is just the engine by itself, 100% of the time the engine has been like ruined, not good, buggered, unusable. The K20 with the Jazz, the Ford 1.8T with the Fox, and also the two 4E FTEs for the Serra. So we're not doing that again. We're, from now on, just going to be buying donor cars where we know the engine works. It's a little bit annoying that we've got to take cars off the road, but hey, that is the way the cookie crumbles. So with all that said, let's get this engine out. Now, removing the engine out of the A3 is more or less the same process as removing the engine out of the Caddy. I started off with taking off the under tray, the wheel arch liners, and then followed by the subframe, and then followed by the headlights and the front bumper. Then I could move on to disconnecting the AC and coolant lines again, which would then allow me to remove that whole front panel, just like I did earlier on the Caddy. There was then a fair bit more disconnecting to do on the top side of the engine bay, stuff like the engine loom, the gear selectors, the clutch line, and also our fuel lines. Once all of that was done, we could then get the car back up on the ramp to remove the steering rack and the drive shafts. They are. They're rusty. See the catch?
Getting closer.
Closer. One drive shaft. So we are nearly at the point where the VR6 can be removed. We've taken off our front rad pack and we've disconnected clutch lines and fuel lines and everything up at the top. Our drive shafts are out, our subframe and our steering rack is out, and we don't usually remove the steering rack when taking out the engine in any project we do, but we've done it this time because it gives us much better access to that prop shaft, which you can see up there, and it also allows us to remove the exhaust with the engine. So rather than unbolting the whole exhaust and removing it separately, we can actually keep this front section on the engine when the engine comes down and gets removed. So I just think that'll be easier. So we're nearly there now, and the next thing to get on with is the prop shaft. There we go, that was easy. Once I had disconnected the prop shaft from the transfer box, I had figured out that this wouldn't be enough for us to remove this engine. The prop shaft would still be in the way. So I then had to remove the mid and rear sections of the exhaust, and that then gave me enough access to unbolt the prop shaft from the differential, which then allowed me to remove it. Got it. I was just surprised that worked, to be honest. Alright, those can stay with the engine. Actually, can we disconnect it in the middle? Now we disconnect him. I knew a big enough yank would get it. Yep. Don't know whether that's how the Audi techs do it, but
That's how the Jack McNeill text.
it is how the Jack McNeill techs do it. After everything underneath the A3 was disconnected, I then could go back up to the top of the engine bay one last time to unplug the ECU, just like I did on the Caddy earlier. Now, the main difference when doing this was that there were security bolts holding in the ECU, which to remove, I had to use the angle grinder. The technique here was to make a small slit with the angle grinder in the security bolts, which then allowed me to use a flathead screwdriver to unscrew them.
There we go. There's one. There we go. Lovely. One ECU.
Now that the ECU is disconnected, the last thing to do was to feed the wires back through into the engine bay, and then we were finally ready to remove this engine.
Boom. Engine disconnected. Finally. Oh, that took a long time. We can now unbolt our engine mounts and drop out our beautiful VR6 engine. Let's do it.
So that is exactly what I got on with next, using the same technique that I did with the Caddy earlier. So that is our 3.2 litre VR6 engine successfully removed from our A3. And this is just a massive engine. I cannot wait to get this fitted into our Caddy and hopefully running. But there are a few things that we have to do before we can even attempt that. And the main thing, the biggest job, is the wiring. And that's what we're gonna sort of start doing now. Basically, in our Caddy van, we have this, which is our sort of body wiring, which comes all the way down here to this section, which is where it connects up to the engine. And this wiring has a load of diesel stuff in it, basically, like the wiring for our glow plugs, for example. And obviously glow plugs are diesel only. So this obviously all has our diesel wiring. We need to swap that out with petrol stuff, which works with our 3.2 litre petrol engine. So we need to do that now, but obviously I know absolutely nothing about wires, so Dan has come down to give us a hand with all of this, and he's going to start cracking on with that now.
Ooh, that sugar sweet, you got what I need, sipping on the potion, all that good emotion.
So Dan from DW Automotive came down to help us basically do the tricky bit of this swap, which is of course that wiring which I mentioned. As for the process of doing this, Dan needs to strip the wiring loom from the A3 first so that he can use sections of that and transplant that wiring into the Caddy. Now Dan specializes in these Caddy conversions. He's wired up all sorts of engines into these vans, like the 2 litre turbo engines from the Golf GTIs, the 5-cylinder Audi TTRS engines, the 1.9 TDIs, the 1.8 turbos, and basically every interesting Volkswagen Audi Group engine of that era. So if any of you watching this have a Caddy and you want to do a similar conversion, I'll leave all of his information in the description of this video. Something else we had to do here was to remove the rev clocks from both the Caddy and the Audi, and then give them to Dan alongside both keys and both ECUs so that he could do some programming for the immobilizer.
Keep it on repeat, testify the motion.
So it's been about a day and a half now of Dan attacking this wiring, and it is now pretty much at a point where it's finished. He hasn't completely taped up and insulated all of the wires, as you can see, because he wants us to get the engine mounted up, and then he can sort of check that all of the wires are the correct lengths. But other than that, it is pretty much finished, and we are there. And this is the aftermath of all of the wiring. It has been a pretty big job, but now that it's completely finished, well, pretty much completely finished, we can move on to all of the parts that we need to fit onto the Caddy before we even install the engine. Firstly, we need the full VR6 engine and engine loom, and of course, we already have that. It came with the A3. Secondly, the correct body loom wiring for the Caddy, plus the immobilizer coding. Now, Dan is in the middle of doing the immobilizer coding as we speak, and he's already done most of the wiring as you've seen, so that is done. Now, next, all of these parts here, all of these parts are the parts that we need to install into the Caddy before we even mount up the engine. And luckily, every single one of these parts we can use from the A3. Bits like our AC lines, our engine mounts, our brake servo vac line, all of these parts we already have. And that is one of the massive benefits of having this donor car. Rather than having to source all these parts separately, we already have them all, which is great. Except for the
full petrol fuel system. Now, of course, because our Caddy is a diesel, we need a petrol fuel system. And unfortunately, we can't just use the one out of the A3. It won't fit. So I've had to buy a brand new full petrol fuel system for a petrol Caddy from Volkswagen, and it cost a grand total of £1,137. Now, I'm putting some pounds over the screen right now of what that includes. It's stuff like the fuel tank, the fuel pump, the fuel lines, the fuel basket, loads of little bits and bobs, and it has come to that figure, which means that if we don't have to spend any more on this project, we have got a grand total of £4,337 for our VR6 engine swapped Caddy, which is a lot of money, but I don't think it's too bad. So we have that. And then there are also some other bits like the front drive shafts, the subframe, the radiator, and all of these bits we need to install once the engine is fitted. And again, it all can be fitted from the A3, which again is massively helpful. So with all of that said, let's start getting this stuff swapped over. So out of all of the parts that we need to install to the Caddy before fitting the engine, the first thing we're going to fit is the A3's gear selector. Now, to remove the old gear selector, it's pretty simple. The first thing we have to do is to remove the center console. Next, we can unbolt the gear selector. Then we need to go under the van to remove the exhaust heat shield, which will then allow the old gear selector to come out. Cool, and there we have our old gear selector. Hey mate!
It's crazy.
Then fitting the new A3 gear selector is just that exact process in reverse. And the technique that we devised to do this was to have Jav sat in the van up on the ramp, and then I would feed the gear selector up to him from underneath. And that would then allow him to bolt up the gear selector whilst I was supporting it.
Right out the window. There you go.
Oh,
Got it.
Certified mechanic.
Certified.
once that was done, all that was left to do was to just get everything back together. Next, I wanted to sort swapping over everything in the engine bay, like these heater matrix adapter pipes, the AC lines, and also the engine mounts. As for doing the heater matrix pipes, they're pretty easy to swap over. There's just a metal clip that holds them into place. Perfect. The AC lines are also nice and easy. There's just a T40 bolt that holds in each line, and then the driver's engine mount also needs to be removed so the AC lines can be pulled out. The A3 lines can then be fitted in, and they are just a straight swap. And both the A3's engine mounts are also a straight swap over as well. The final things to swap over in the engine bay was the fuel feed line and the brake servo vac line. But once that was done, I could then focus on the fuel system. Okay, so next up, we need to install our new fuel tank. And to do that, I'm thinking we have to remove this bottom wooden panel to access the top of the old fuel tank so that we can disconnect it from there and then remove it from the bottom. But also, I do just want to remove all of these wooden panels in the back here because they're not very pretty and they're definitely aftermarket. So we're going to remove all the wooden panels and then we can get on with removing our fuel tank. Now, what I didn't realize at this point was that you actually can't access the top of the fuel tank from the back of this van like you can in practically every single car that I've ever worked on. So for the purpose of this engine swap, doing this is actually pretty pointless as it isn't going to help us fit the new fuel system. However, even after noticing this, I just got completely sidetracked with cleaning up the back of the van and making it look as perfect as I could because it was an absolute mess. So once Jav and I had removed all of the wooden panels and completely transformed the back of our van, we could then refocus on doing the fuel system. So the first thing I wanted to get done was to completely remove the standard diesel fuel system. That includes absolutely everything such as the fuel tank, the fuel filter and the fuel lines. There we go. Oh, I didn't break it. Beautiful. In theory, it should come down. I think there may be a couple other things. Holding it on? I think it's just, yeah, it's just like the neck of the...
Yeah.
Get him on there. Look at that. Somebody say efficiency.
What a tool.
I mean, what a sick tool that is.
Very good.
Look at that. Da-da-da. Fuel tank. All right.
The next thing to do is to build up the new petrol fuel tank by installing the fuel pump and the carbon canister. Now, before getting this fuel tank fitted, I've firstly got to install the new fuel lines, and there's a black fuel feed line and a clear breather line to fit. And as for doing this, it is a fairly delicate job. We want to make sure to not accidentally break these fuel lines whilst fitting them, but as long as you're careful, it is fairly simple. After those fuel lines were in, the final thing to do was to install the new fuel tank. And this is actually a lot harder than you might think, because we had to sort of twist the fuel tank around and do all sorts of acrobatics to get it into place. But once it was fitted, that was then all of the fuel system stuff done.
Okay, so that is now absolutely everything installed onto the Caddy that we needed to install before fitting our engine. So now that is all done, we can work on moving our engine underneath the van and lowering the van over the engine and getting it mounted up. Well, there we have it. That is a Golf R engine installed into a Caddy van. I am so excited to hear this thing start up for the first time in our van, because the noise that these engines make, for those of you who know, it is a pretty crazy sound, and that coming out of a van is going to be mental. But before we can do that, obviously, there are a few jobs that we need to get on with, and the main one is to do with the wiring. And as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, Dan has left a few of the wires sort of exposed, and the reason why is that he needs to potentially lengthen them and shorten them. Now that the engine is in, he can know how long the wires need to be. So he's going to come and do that shortly. But then after that, it is literally just a case of getting everything back together.
So we are now at a pretty substantial milestone with the engine swap, with that beautiful VR6 now being mounted into the Caddy's engine bay, and we are definitely on the home straight with all of the work that we need to do. But as I mentioned, the first thing we can get on with now was the wiring that Dan needed to complete now that the engine was mounted up. Once Dan had finished his work with the wiring, he also installed the new coded rev clocks off camera, and then after he had done that, I could crack on with connecting everything in the engine bay up to our new VR6. One of the main things that we actually have to install from the A3, which I didn't mention earlier, is the A3's ECU. I could go ahead and connect all of the wiring up to that, and also get it mounted up with some double-sided tape. Next, I could crack on with connecting up the new gear selectors alongside the clutch line. We also had to make sure to bleed the clutch system as well, because I really want to drive the van by the end of this video. Now, all this process is doing is basically just removing the air that's got into the clutch line and replacing it with the hydraulic fluid that's needed to operate the clutch. And the method I'm using to do this is to open and close the bleed nipple whilst Jav presses and lifts the clutch pedal.
Up, down.
And once the clutch is fully bled, I can then move on to installing the exhaust.
This is going to be interesting. Right, come on. I can't even see it, like pitch black up there. Oh, can you actually like sneak? We can put him over there like that. That's the extension we're going for.
Now, as for bolting up the exhaust, it definitely wasn't easy, but this extension was the only way I could think of doing it.
Oh yeah.
So that's the front section of the exhaust fitted, and we're not installing any more exhaust in this video, so this van is about to be very loud. But once that was done, I could then move on to the drive shafts. Now, of course, like I mentioned earlier, these two front drive shafts which we're installing now are the ones that came off the A3.
Get him in there. Well, that is now our drive shafts fitted, and I just thought I'd clear something up because a few of you might be wondering what we're doing with the drivetrain on our Caddy, because the A3 was all-wheel drive, and you might be wondering, are we making the Caddy all-wheel drive? And the answer is no, because it is a lot of work. Essentially, what you've got to do is cut out the whole floor, weld an S3 or an A3 floor. I've heard some people sort of extend chassis legs. It is a heck of a lot of work, so we're not touching that today, probably ever. So we're just going to stick with putting in our front drive shafts, and what that means is that the sort of little prop shaft donut which used to connect up to the prop shaft on the A3 is just going to be left like that, and it's not going to be connected to anything, so it might be spinning around in there, but it's not going to do any harm. All of the power will now be going through those two front drive shafts. So I just thought I'd clear that up, but for now we can get on the subframe.
So like I mentioned earlier, the subframe that we'll be installing on our Caddy is the one that comes on the A3. Now you can actually use the Caddy subframe for this engine swap. It does work perfectly fine. However, the A3 subframe is actually an upgraded subframe. It's made out of aluminium compared to the Caddy's cast iron one, meaning that it's a lot lighter, which will help our Caddy become even more of a race van.
Right, so we have found these two air filters in the corner of the unit, and we're going to see if one of them will fit onto our MAF sensor here. I've no idea whether this is going to work or not. Okay, that one is way too small. So no, that one is not going to work. I think that one is bigger, so my hopes are on this one. Will it fit? Oh, it's very close. I reckon with some persuasion that'll go on. Oh yes! Oh yes, right, we've got, I reckon, mate, if that fits, that is unbelievably lucky.
That is so good.
Mate.
Always keep your air filters.
Yeah, always have air filters just chilling at the unit. Oh. Air filter. I mean, also, that is like black on black. That looks really good. I am pleased with that. We'll just have him sitting in the corner. Battery there. Job's a good one.
So the next thing to do was to get the battery installed.
I'm not sure what I think about that air filter. The good thing is about the van is that the bonnet is so much higher than the top of the engine.
Oh yeah.
Like this, it's like way higher than the Audi. So
Loads of room.
So that can actually probably sit there for a bit like that. But obviously in the future what we want is it going like down there or something.
Yeah.
I think that'd be better. But for now, that will do. Right, shall we get the front on?
Let's do it.
Now before installing the Caddy's front panel, I've firstly got to swap over the radiators. So the end product that we are after here is the A3's radiator fitted onto the Caddy's front panel, and luckily it is a straight swap. But once that's finished, I can then go ahead and get this new front panel combination installed onto the Caddy. And then the final thing to do is to get the headlights, bumper, wheel arch liners and the wheels fitted back onto the van to finish everything off.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I can finally introduce to you the Caddy R. It has been an absolute shift to get this in. I am an absolute state right now, but there are only a few jobs that we've got left to do before we can try and start this. Firstly, I want to quickly check the engine oil. Secondly, we need to get coolant in it. And thirdly, we of course need to put petrol in our lovely new fuel tank. So once those are done, we can give this a start.
So rather than be lazy and just check the engine oil, I decided that the best course of action for the longevity of our engine would be to do a proper oil change.
This is going to go everywhere.
And then it was just a case of filling up the coolant, then filling up the fuel tank, and then finally, after a mammoth amount of work, we could give the van a start.
Right, it is now the moment of truth, guys. We've got the key for our van, the engine's in, everything's connected up, the wiring's done, everything is done. We've got our engine oil, our coolant, our fuel's in the tank. It is now time to see if a Golf R engine will start in a van. I am pretty nervous. This has been a pretty strenuous engine swap. It's been very hot and it's been a lot of work, but I'm hopeful this will start. So let's turn the key and see what happens. Right. Okay, key in, the ignition. The lights are on. It's beeping at me.
But the van wouldn't even crank. I didn't know what was going on at this point, but there was a bit of a problem.
We getting anything?
Nothing is happening, no. What we might have to do is give Dan a call.
Potentially.
I think that's what's going, because, yeah, it's weird, it cranked. It did crank. When Dan was here last time, we literally quickly cranked it just to see if it would, and it did. So that's not doing it now is weird.
So I gave Dan a ring and he seemed to think that it was something wrong with an ECU connection. You see, a few days prior, I had actually lost a small little purple clip that is designed to hold the wires into the ECU plug. And Dan's theory was that because we didn't have that, the wires pinned into that ECU plug had unplugged slightly. And after investigating this, he was absolutely right. So I just had to make sure that the wires were properly pressed into the plug as I connected the plug up to the ECU. And after I tried that, I thought I could give the start another go.
That sounds a bit more promising. Okay. Okay, so now it's cranking. Okay, so that was the problem. So it was a loose connection on the ECU, which is my fault because I disconnected it and reconnected it a load. But we are now cranking. So this should take a while for the fuel to get to the engine, but I do want to crank it a few times just to make sure it's got oil pressure as well.
So after connecting up the battery pack, we could start cranking over the engine. Now, I wasn't expecting the engine to start up straight away. I was expecting 30 seconds or so of cranking in order to get the fuel through the fuel system and into the engine.
Okay. So it's cranking, but it just hasn't got any fuel, which, I mean, it makes sense why it doesn't have any fuel, because I still think it's just going up, but
how long will it take?
How long does it take? I don't know. I've never done this before. I've never tried to start a car with like a completely dry fuel system, so I don't know how long it will take.
But after cranking for what seemed like years, the engine still wouldn't start.
I don't know whether the fuel pump's priming. Is it like the Fox? Remember?
Oh yeah.
Do you remember you had to open the door? Interesting. I feel like it should have come through by now. I don't know, I feel like it should have. Well, I think we definitely know what the problem is. I think the problem is no fuel. Like, that's definitely the issue. I think the wiring's perfect now that we've fixed that little ECU thing.
Yeah.
I think everything is going to work, but it's just not getting fuel. So it's whether, have we installed everything correctly? I mean, there's no fuel leaks underneath the car. So my only thing is like, A, is the fuel pump priming and is the fuel pump actually doing its job? And if it is, then is the fuel, maybe the fuel just isn't, it's not there yet. Maybe we just keep going. I don't know.
I'm not sure, it's hard to tell.
But the truth is, I was clutching at straws with this explanation. I really had no idea what was going on. I did quickly remove the fuel feed line in the engine bay just to double check that my theory of no fuel was correct, and when I took it off, lo and behold, there was absolutely no fuel in the fuel lines, meaning that our engine just wasn't getting any fuel. But even with knowing that, my question was why? So to investigate, we removed the fuel pump from the fuel tank to test to see if it works. Now, it was a brand new fuel pump, so there's no reason why anything should be wrong with it, but there is a chance that it could have been defective, so we wanted to test to see if it works when putting some current to it.
What is wrong with you?
Work.
Work, mate. In my expert opinion, it's fine. I don't know, it looks fine. Why is it not working? You can hear that? Very, very faint little noise. We'll do it again. So that confirms to us that the fuel pump does in fact work, which makes sense because it is brand new. So that means that there isn't, like, everything in here works. It means that there's no current going to that plug, which would indicate either well, the only thing I can think is that a fuse is gone, or a relay's not working or something. It's got to be a fuse.
So lucky for me, Dan was just around the corner when I discovered this, meaning that he could quickly come and test all of the fuel related circuits with his multimeter to find out exactly what was happening here. And as it happens, there was a fuse in the wrong location in the fuse box, which makes complete sense.
Okay, so after some investigative work by myself and Dan, who's come around to give us a hand, we are now at the point where we think the Caddy will start because we turned the key over and we heard the fuel pump prime. Essentially what was wrong, we think, again, not 100% sure whether this is going to work, but we think that there was a fuse in the wrong location in the fuse box. So we've swapped it over now and we're going to see if it starts. Come on, Van. Come on. Oh my god, I can't hear my thoughts.
That is insane.
That is crazy.
She's good to go.
She is good to go though. Oh, we're gonna have to drive that on the road to do our 0 to 60.
God damn it.
Is that louder than the Fusion? I think it is.
I think it is. Definitely.
Bro, on idle, it sounds like a high fuel dragster, doesn't it? It's like. That is antisocial.
That is the loudest van.
That is antisocial. But yeah, this is gonna be I think I set off some car alarms. I actually think I set off some cars. Anyways, it is now time to go and take the Caddy R out for a drive. Let's see how far it is. Yeah, it's maiden voyage.
It's maiden voyage.
Let's see how fast it is. I am really scared. I don't think I've driven anything. I think this beats the Fusion for like just a ridiculous amount of noise. Oh my god.
Even in here it sounds so loud. Because it like echoes in the back.
Yeah, it like echoes in the back of the van, doesn't it? Right, little second gear pull. This is sick!
This is the best work, man.
This is so cool, man. Oh my god. This is the coolest van. This engine is awesome.
It's so fast.
It's actually quick as well, isn't it?
So fast. My bum is vibrating on the seat.
Literally. Mate, you get a lot of bum vibrations with this engine. Oh my God.
Holy moly.
Right, big pull round this corner. Let's do it. First gear pull. Oh my God! This is ridiculous.
Making me scream like a little girl. This car.
Bro, this thing is fast. This thing is actually fast. This thing is fast. God. Oh my God.
This is nuts.
This is ridiculous.
Oh,
My heart is actually racing right now.
makes me fear for my life.
Mate, I'm gonna need like a 2-week holiday to recover from this first drive.
This is crazy.
Right. Do you reckon we do our 0 to 60?
Yes, let's do it.
Let's see how much the van has improved its 0 to 60 time. I'm thinking it's gonna be quick as hell.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's do it. 3, 2, 1, go. I forgot to tell you, mate, we went way past 60 then. I forgot to, alright, we've got to do that
You're
again.
enjoying it too much.
Mate, I was enjoying driving that too much. I forgot to tell you when to stop.
I looked over and I saw like 7. I was like, oh my God, we need to stop it. But it's definitely in the 6s. Holy shit.
This thing is so sick. Oh my God. 3, 2, 1, go. 6.9, and I shifted just before 60 miles an hour,
Yeah,
so
did.
I reckon we'll be able to get that way quicker. But ladies and gentlemen, that is a massive chunk off the initial 0 to 60 time of like 17.8 or something.
Yeah.
If you did go on to enjoy this video, make sure to smash that like button, click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one. Let's go!